pay them to do it.
You volunteered, didn't you? We're paying you, aren't we?
The first of the duo is an opinionated local sports editor who has made a name for himself thanks to his beard.
That's a serious beard you got going on. I mean, you're heading toward Doug Dynasty, but well-groomed. That's a good look. If I ever did that, that's the look I would go for.
The other guy is a guy who takes no prisoners when it comes to sports.
Let's stomp these dudes.
Together, they bring you the best in Oklahoma State sports talk and opinions on sports from around the country.
That's right. Listen up. Hey, listen up. You.
It's Jason Elmquist.
Today, I'm a mild-mannered reporter for the newspaper.
And Patrick Wheeler.
I'm a very dangerous man.
This is the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
That's what I'm talking about, sport!
You ain't never heard nothing like this. Let me work, show me where the mic is. I'm on stage, black shirt, and my Timbs, you know how I do it. I ain't playing with you, I've been grinding. Anybody trying to sleep on me, better do something with your eyelids. I hear a lot of whining.
It's the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler, Jason Elmquist with you on this Thursday afternoon. Well, Tom Dorado will be in with us in the 4 o'clock hour as well. And we'll have his man coming on later on as well, Donnie. You said Donnie Williams, is that right, Jason?
Donnie Walton.
Donnie Walton. I'm trying to get all these names right.
Coach Rob Walton's son.
Yeah,
Coach Rob Walton.
So he's in the Mariners, I believe you said triple A team right now in their organization. He's been called up before as well, so it'll be interesting to get his perspective on everything that's going on and what he thinks, like, with Major League Baseball, will it come back and when will it come back, and that idea that was proposed yesterday, which we mentioned, will also be a question I'm sure we'll throw to him as well. So we'll have him on, I believe, a little bit after the 4 o'clock hour too, so be sure to stay tuned for that.
I'm sure he's also kind of interested in the fact that there was rumors being floated around that I think Jeff Bassan kind of squashed a little bit yesterday, that they were already talking about canceling the minor league season this year.
Yeah, I had seen that too. So, and hopefully, I don't know, it could really come to that. It's definitely possible. They did also announce, I think, just saw right before we hopped on, the Little League World Series has been canceled. And that is the first time that's happened since it started back in 1947. So that tells you right there. I would hate to be in that position because, and I say this every time I hear something gets canceled, but a Little League World Series for some guys is definitely once in a lifetime for those kids. So I definitely feel for that right now. That's a tough position to be in, but you understand the reasoning behind it. But the good news is that there are plenty of different sports that are talking about coming back, as well as a couple that we'll get into today later on. We'll talk about that. That seems to be the theme of today's news coming out in the sports world, which I'm very excited about. But before we get to that, Jason, let's hop on into the Oklahoma State football team grabbing on to another 2021 commit in Jaden Nixon out of Frisco, Texas, who is a junior running back there. I mentioned it earlier today when I was looking at some of his stats. He actually had a really good season as a junior last year and finished with over 1,000 total yards, 16 total touchdowns, and he's the number 32 running back and the number 68 overall prospect in Texas. And of course, his father and mother were both athletes at Oklahoma State as well. So the Cowboys add another solid skill position player to the 2021 class.
And I know some people might look at it and kind of, to maybe turn their nose up to the star system. But I just also want to point out right now, I believe it was right around number 32 is the ranking that they gave one Chuba Hubbard when he was coming out of high school. So, I mean, a top 30 running back, top 35, honestly, if you go back over the past few years, top 35 running back. Again, Jonathan Taylor was also a guy that was right there with Chuba Hubbard, in the back of the line of some of these elite running backs that they thought of coming out of high school. So, again, as long as he can pan out, I think it's also great the fact that you're starting to see kind of these legacies, if you will, because obviously you've, this upcoming season, this freshman class has a wide receiver whose dad also played at Oklahoma State for football. So it's nice to start seeing some of these legacy athletes start making their way to Oklahoma State as well.
Yeah, and with running back, such a position, I think, that it is undervalued a lot of times and maybe not graded as high as it should be with some of these guys as well. But you talk about a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can line up as a receiver. And, again, only a junior putting up those numbers. That's solid to see on any team, especially in Texas. Of course, his father is Roy Johnson. He played football for the Pokes. He led her to 94 and 95 back then. And his mother Tina was a jumper on the Cowgirl track and field team. So, yeah, definitely a legacy player. And will be interesting to see where he fits in when he gets into Stillwater. But I have to think that's a solid commitment right now for a position that is definitely, and he even said so when he was asked about it, somewhere a history of some amazing backs that come out of Oklahoma State. And he could obviously try to go down as one of those too before it's all said and done. So I think he has to appreciate that. But you have to give credit too. Oklahoma State still getting out there and making sure to get this recruiting going in a time where it sounds like it could be extremely difficult in a situation right now. We know the recruiting has had a ton of limitations, so you have to appreciate Oklahoma State getting out there, finding their guy, and locking up a couple of guys early. I think he's the third in the 2021 class now that's officially committed, and so that's definitely something that you have to appreciate them going after and getting it done early on.
Sorry, I actually just got disconnected. I just got back to the house from taking photos at the flyover, so my phone reconnected to the Wi-Fi and I lost connection.
There we
I'm
go.
not sure what you just said.
Oh, we're solid. I was just finishing up Jaden Nixon there, the new talking about his parents, obviously that were cowboy and cowgirl athletes as well. So that's definitely a pretty cool thing to see. And I think I said, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, but I think that's the third commitment now in the 2021 class. I believe, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure off the top of my head either.
I think that it's somewhere around there. So either way, that's a solid position to get an early commitment on. Anytime you'll take that. Let's look at the NCAA. They have been the target of conversations for the past couple days and back in the news again today. Of course, yesterday we know they talked about the Board of Governors recommended that the NIL rules that we see might be in place starting in the 2021 season, and that could take place in January. We'll talk about that later. But let's look at what the NCAA said today. Their board does not recommend changes to the transfer waiver process. Everybody knows what that is when you transfer for those 5 sports that we've mentioned before, including football, basketball, and then when you transfer, you have to sit out a year. And that's, to me, been one of the dumbest rules NCAA has ever implemented. They expect to vote on this on May 20th. And again, have recommended that changes do not be made to this situation here. So it's almost like, to me, they jumped on the NIL thing yesterday, and that was kind of a good step, at least in my opinion, for college sports. And then they take 2 back here when it comes to talking about the transfer waiver process. I think it's one of the dumbest rules that's ever been a part of college sports, and I don't see what everybody can gain from that. If you're going to transfer, you should be able to get to a school that you want to go to on that first time and be able to play immediately. I've always thought that.
Yeah, NCAA they never seem to get out from underneath their own feet. They find themselves finally in a good PR situation, and then they just stub their toe by bringing this one up. Because again, I don't see any reason not to just go ahead and have this blanket 1-year waiver, because it's already a farce, the whole waiver system right now. Because when you have elite quarterbacks transfer nowhere near home, completely to a different conference, and get the automatic waiver, while someone's moving closer to home because of health issues, don't get a waiver, that it's an absolute farce. So I don't know why they're doing it. That's why when I saw the announcement from Beck McMurphy this morning, I had to quote tweet it and said, we're just going to keep our annual tradition of saying, why is this person being granted a waiver when this person isn't? Yeah. And it's just, again, the NCAA, it can never get out of its own way, it seems like.
It's kind of, to me, like they said, hey, we just did something good here yesterday. We better do something stupid so people don't forget who we are. And that's made 100% clear today again that the NCAA cannot get things right. I agree with some comments that have been made that they've been late on the whole NIL thing that they talked about yesterday. That came too late anyways. And then on top of this, and this seems like a no-brainer. It's kind of like you said, like I don't see any reason why they wouldn't pull the trigger on just allowing a one-time transfer waiver here for these players, especially when the transfer portal has become such a big deal. And a lot of players have entered it and are still going to. And in the years to come, if they have a better situation that can ultimately push forward the sports that are involved in the NCAA, then to me, it's almost a win-win. The NCAA doesn't see it like that. Again, it's kind of like you put it. I don't know how they can, and there's some decisions that they made, of course, over the years where you're just like, why? You're trying to find reasoning behind it. And when you can't do that, you know there's obviously something wrong, and that's the case with the NCAA more times than not.
Yeah, again, the hope, though, is maybe they'll eventually figure this out and understand that, hey, because again, we've addressed this and I've addressed this before. The fact of the matter is it's they're doing it for the money sports to, try to make a fair and balanced, and it's not. Because, again, when your elite athletes are being allowed to get that 1 year that you're, be granted waivers to play instantly and others aren't, it clearly is not actually fair. But, I mean, because the fact of the matter is you look at baseball and softball and wrestling, you don't have to sit for a year. It's really just your basketball and football that they do that, and it's so you don't have this quote unquote, as Tom would put it, free agency. Well, you already have it in almost every other sport, so why not just make it a fair all the way across? And then you also get away from this whole, this person deserves it because of this argument, even though we can't tell you what that reason is because we're as sketchy as the voters who kept Eddie Sutton out of the Hall of Fame for the past 15 years. Hopefully they'll finally just pull their heads out of their butts and actually realize this is the smart decision.
Yeah, the NCAA is a huge contradiction. They always have been. They come back on everything they say, and they dance around all the issues and come up with new excuses every single time. Again, this is expected to be voted on May 20th, so that's coming up pretty quickly, and it looks like right now that it will be there will be no changes, even though we would both agree. I believe that there definitely should be. Some good news coming out of the sports world today. NASCAR announces when they will officially plan on returning. And that will be taking place, as I find it here again, that I just had it. Here we go. May 17th. They're taking place without fans, the race and the Cup Series at Darlington Raceway. You're ultimately going to have 7 races in 11 days when this all kicks off. So that's a lot of racing. And I it kind of makes me think that I would believe that's how these sports that would resume might even have to take this type of stance that NASCAR is doing here with a lot of action going on in a short amount of time. The NBA, I think, would be the same way. For instance, maybe even Major League Baseball, if they plan on getting a certain number of games in, you'd have to do a lot of games in a few days of time there. So, but a NASCAR is, I guess, the first sport that's really put out an actual date saying they will be taking that Cup Series race to Darlington again without fans. So I don't know. Are you happy to hear this news? At least the sport is announcing that they're coming back.
No, and I find it fascinating. I almost feel like it's hey, we've gotten actually a lot more bad publicity from this iRacing than we thought we would. So maybe we can try to get things, because I think the biggest thing was a lot of these locations that they're hosting the races, it wasn't necessarily their decision. It was the state had closed down sporting venues and stuff like that. So now that some of these states are starting to allow at least the opening of facilities like tracks, allows you that opportunity to at least get back in place, even though without fans. But it's interesting because like I said, when the iRacing thing first started, it's like, man, this is going to be big. This is going to help them out for a while. And then the last 2 weeks, it's been nothing but negative publicity, it seems like. So they're like, "Yay, let's give a dose of some positive. Like we're looking at trying to get back to racing regularly instead of this awkward iRacing that has left a bad taste in your mouth over the last 2 weeks."
Yeah, how do you think they thought when that they launched this? Hey, we're going to launch this iRacing series, but we probably won't have any racial slurs dropped on here, and we probably won't have anybody rage quit on here, and everything else that went wrong.
Yeah, we'll do iRacing and probably won't lose any sponsors or anything like that. Yeah. And the other interesting thing is I saw just a little bit ago that LeBron James actually tweeted out the fact that apparently there were some rumors or quote-unquote reports where executives and agents were claiming that the NBA was going to, they're not going to return. And apparently he's claiming that has not even been in discussion yet, that they actually want to try to come back in the NBA to finish off their season. And it makes you wonder if it's kind of like with what NASCAR is doing, where you have to try to condense things. If that's something they do, if they go to the playoffs, of instead of having 2 or 3 days in between some of these games, of, having some back-to-back days of games to try to get everything in.
Yeah, and him saying that the idea of canceling the season hasn't been tossed around, I don't believe that for a second. I think that's definitely been thrown around to the ears and eyes of some people in the NBA. I mean, especially now when we know that they're crunching for time. But when they announce a new location, they might be thinking about, which we'll get into later as well. I don't buy that was never in the thoughts, or even LeBron maybe just saying that to kind of keep fans at bay a little bit as well. When all the NBA fans want to hear what LeBron has to say. I can't say I'm one of those guys, but when it does come from what he has to say, and all of a sudden a bunch of years are like, hey, the NBA apparently, according to LeBron, is not going to be canceled, even though all signs point to they will. So it'll be interesting to see, especially when we talk about the idea that they've pitched later comes to fruition. Again, I think it all kind of pans on if the testing is available, and the NBA has made that very clear. Adam Silver has said over and over, that their number one priority is the health of the NBA players and fans and everybody else. And if testing becomes available, then they'll try to reconsider launching. And you have to kind of throw in the whole, what Chris Paul said, how long will they need to get back into it as well?
Yeah, and again, I made the argument that I think a lot of these players are going to have a better feel for how long they need, and maybe that's the approach they take of getting kind of almost an NFL or an NBA PA, a union kind of vote of get an idea of what the players think, how long it's going to take. Because again, a guy like Chris Paul, and maybe he needs more than 2 weeks because he is on the older side. But he's also one of those guys that has been in the league so long that he knows how long it takes for his body to get to peak shape for a season. And if someone like him is coming out and say we're going to need more than 2 weeks, I have to believe that that's going to be the case. Whether or not the NBA is trying to push it and make it 2 weeks, will the players, refuse? And because again, being the union, they're going to have a little say in how long that window is.
Yeah. When we come back, Texas A&M had some good news about their upcoming football season and having students on campus in the fall. Of course, we talk NASCAR, and we'll talk about more of the NBA's plan that has been floated around as of late, too. That's all next on the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
Feel like I'm gonna puke, cause my taxes are due. Do my best, we'll begin with a 1 or a 2. Been a hell of a ride, but I'm thinking it's time to grow.
Metronome.
Man, I'm up to something. Woody-la-dee-do, thank you all for coming. I hope you like the show, cause it's on a budget. So woody-la-dee-do, yeah, come on, here we go, yeah, come on.
Here we go.
So put your best face on, everybody pretend you know this song.
Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. 5.1 FM. Triple Play Sports Radio app. 533-1051, 533-1020. Thanks for hanging out with us on Thursday. Patrick Wheeler, Jason Elmquist with you. More good news just continues to flow in from universities and from schools. From professional sports and everywhere else. We're finally getting positive reports during this whole coronavirus pandemic. It feels like it's been forever. We'll start with first, Texas A&M University System Chancellor John Sharp told all 11 university presidents that are involved in that system that they will reopen their campuses next school year, and they will also be ready to play sports, which means football. He said not entirely like last fall, but not like this spring either, meaning when they open. He said this is the big one to me. He said, quote, "It's pretty clear we will be open in the fall." I think that when you see something like that, you get these presidents, you get some of these ADs that are able to say more now. Not that we just hope, but it's getting more and more clear. It's looking like more and more of a sure thing that we will have kids on campus, and Texas A&M goes as far to say we're going to play football. We know that Texas has reopened. Governor Greg Abbott's done a fantastic job down there. And then on top of this, The news comes out just a little bit ago of University of Iowa president coming out and saying that they're hopeful that all that will be behind them at some point with the coronavirus, and they plan to resume practice, including football, starting June 1st. I think we're going to start seeing more of this. It's always been the who's going to start it off in this whole pandemic. Who's going to be the first one to close something? Who's going to be the first one to cancel something? Now it's at the point of who's going to be the first one to reopen? Who's going to be the first person to make comments that we're going to, no, not hopefully, we're going to get this done at this point in time? Are we cautiously being optimistic here, or can we go ahead and say, hey, Texas A&M and Iowa, they know what they're talking about. Let's get behind them on this.
Well, and I think for a lot of universities, it's been almost we can't talk about it because we're at the mercy of our state governor saying whether or not the state's still closed or not. And obviously for Iowa, I didn't even realize that apparently Iowa was the only state who actually never really closed down. They never made most of the businesses close and stuff like that we've seen across the country. Obviously here in Oklahoma as well. So it's again, I don't know if they shut down their campus, Iowa or Iowa State. I don't know anything about that. But as far as shutting down, Great Clips Hair Salon and stuff like that, it sounds like they never had to deal with that in Iowa. But the thing we also have to keep in mind is while he's pointing at June 1, it falls upon the NCAA. If NCAA is still saying no practice, then they can say June 1, kind of like with Mike Gundy, you throw out a date, but it's still up to the higher ups to decide when that date is. So I think right now, everything NCAA wise is shut down through May 31st. And that's probably why he's looking at June 1 as a date. But if the NCAA comes out and says, yeah, we can start getting back to normal, but practices aren't allowed until July 1 or whatever, well, then obviously you can't actually practice till then. But it is interesting the fact that he's looking at that the president of Iowa is looking at University of Iowa is looking at June 1 as, hey, we should be able to get back to practicing for all of our athletes on campus.
Yeah, so you get Big Ten, the SEC, two schools coming out and saying, we're going to have football. And it kind of brings up the thought, too, kind of like you just said. On May 31st, are these presidents and ADs expecting the NCAA to be like, okay, we've had another month go by here, and we're still seeing declining numbers. Everything looks good. We've got more studies out that young people are hardly affected by this. Let's go for it. Maybe that's what they're going off of, because they have to, and they might even know more than we do, obviously, on maybe they're getting the positive all thumbs up signs that, hey, be ready on May 31st, because come next day, starting in June, there's going to be this all good for at least some areas, especially in the Midwest, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12 areas.
Well, and the interesting thing, though, as well, I don't know if you saw the other tweet that I sent to you. Again, this is from the information is coming from Vanessa Miller.
Yeah.
She's the education reporter for the, I believe, the Cedar Rapids Gazette, but she said the quote, also tweeted out a quote from the University of Iowa president on football in the fall. Quote was, would we let players play with no fans? I don't know. We'd have to do a lot of testing of the individual players. So that's the interesting thing is a lot of people saying, yeah, we're going to play football, but it also sounds like there's also this reservation of, can we play football with no fans, or will we be permitted to, or is it even worth it? Stuff like that. That's what's going to be fascinating as well. Is because again, if you can play, but you can't play in front of fans, is the NCAA or presidents or whatever are going to decide that it was probably safe for us to play, but we probably shouldn't be doing it in front of fans, so maybe we shouldn't be doing it at all. That's what we don't know. We don't, and it sounds like even this Iowa president doesn't know, is if we can't do it in front of fans, should we be allowed to do it, period?
In your opinion, and your idea and thought process here, would universities consider, before saying no fans at all, would they consider kind of doing what restaurants, for instance, are doing, around here, 50% capacity. You basically got people at every other table. Would you think about opening a stadium up to people on every 6 seats or something like that?
And I actually saw, I need to go back and search for it. I saw somebody had talked to an architect apparently a very, very popular architect for sports venues, who said that he's been tasked with how can we do it to, in most of these venues of having fans return, but still having social distancing. And he said essentially most football stadiums would only be allowed to be at 20% capacity to still maintain a 6-foot radius. And again, that brings up the question: is it worth it at that point? I mean, because you're still going to have to field, the express workers and whatnot, concessions, stuff like that. Does that outweigh the costs of only permitting 20% inside your facility? And we also have to keep in mind a good portion of your money is in suites, and you're usually trying to pack 20 to 30 people into each suite. What money you lose from that as well. So I mean, that's what's going to be fascinating, and I'm sure a lot of ADs are trying to figure out right now is if we are allowed to have fans but only at a certain capacity, is it worth it? Because ultimately we could be losing money ultimately in that venue if we return to sports.
And I talked to Tom about this off air yesterday. And the reason I don't think that there will be fans allowed in stadiums, at least initially, is because with these new reports coming out on data of how it affects people by age, you have to look at the data that says, hey, older people are definitely the ones that have to watch out. We've known that all the time, but it's 100% being confirmed now. Those are the ones at most risk from the coronavirus. And I told Tom, I said, hey, I don't know exactly how it is here at Oklahoma State yet, but I'm sure it's like at a lot of places. There's plenty of students and kids at these games, but there's a lot of elderly people that have season tickets and come to football games. If that's the case, do you have to put a restriction on that or something and say, look, if you're 50 or older, sorry, we can't let you in? And even if you were to say, well, we can do that and hold off half the stadium for them or something like that, you're still running a risk, because if one person happens to come down with it there, all of a sudden you've got lawsuits on your hands. That's why I don't think there'll be fans, at least initially.
Yeah, because, I mean, you look at it, again, going back to the suites, a lot of them are your maybe retired oil barons and stuff like that. People who are older of age and have a lot of money, and they're spending that money now on suites and going to Cowboy football games. And we got to keep in mind, while you can say, okay, well, maybe we put the suites are only for the for the elderly. Well, then what about the drinks and concessions that you have available to them? The workers you have for the elevators and keeping track of who's allowed in and out. Most of those are younger people. There's the suites are on the same floor as the media. You don't have a whole lot of 60 plus media people that they could potentially run into.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Because the media, I mean, it's going to be it's going to be tough, even if you're thinking, well, the suites are going to be protected type of thing. If that's what I'm saying is, if you might think that, I don't think it is. So I'm agreeing with you and Tom, is if you really think about it, it's going to be hard to allow but also protect that older group, because there is, and I said it, I probably was King when King was still here, is the fact that, on the field, when I'm on the field taking photos, I look up into the stadium or up into the stands, there's a good portion of them are older citizens watching those games.
Oh man, it's just how it is. And it was like that even where I went. Of course, it's a little different at a Division II school where I was at Missouri Southern, but almost every fan, especially those basketball games, are older people. Now, when that's the case, I don't see how universities could pick and choose on these fans. They come in and to the upfront gate and they say, how old are you? And they say, well, you're over 50. Sorry, we can't let you in. I just don't see that being a realistic thing to happen. So that's again, and you bring up a good point about the whole them being in suites and all of that. There's no way to limit exposure to younger people at these games, even if they were up in boxes, because of all the elements you just said. Literally, you could be standing in line too close to a younger person, and that's all it could take. So I don't think that would be something that they could finally decide on and come on a decision on. And yes, we can allow older people, but here's how we do it. That's why instead of just picking and choosing on who can come in, they just won't have fans, period.
Yeah, and again, that as the Iowa president just said, is it worth it then at that point? Again, there's a lot of TV money, but at the same time, does TV say, well, it's not the same product? I get that maybe some people, more people initially will watch it, but we think in the downstream, at the end of it, without that, the atmosphere, fans almost, and that's what maybe you start seeing again. We could maybe get a clearer picture from when NASCAR does their thing. If by the end of that 7 race in 11 days, the numbers have plummeted because it doesn't have that same feel, because you're just basically watching, then you actually realize there's just 32 people driving around in a circle and no chaos of the fans, the hooting and hollering of them when there's a big crash. Then maybe you look at college football and say, hey, if there's no fans, it may not be a good TV product as well. That'll be the interesting thing is everyone's having to look and actually look at all the details, not just say, hey, we need football back, is we need the atmosphere, we need the tailgating, we need all this that has made college football so great. Can it survive on TV without all that?
How awkward would it be watching a race with a huge crash and then there's nothing happening? Nobody's cheering or anything like that. That would be really weird to see. Yeah, and for football, it kind of brings up the idea too, if you're a TV market, do you try to push the idea of, look, we want you to be on our television station and we want to televise these games, but we're going to have to only say we can do conference games, for instance, because we don't think we can make enough money on Oklahoma State and Oregon State playing each other. It has to be conference only for us to be able to televise it and that type of thing. Do they throw that idea out there and maybe the money goes up a little bit there? Because it's like you said, with the extension of the season, and we know how those early weeks are in college football, there's rarely a lot of really good competition until you really get into conference play. At least that's how I view it. So if that's the case, then does the television market issue come in, and where does the money come from? So yeah, I understand that.
Well, and the other thing though is you also the struggle with that is how do you approach the bowl games? Because for example, and again, I'm not trying to pick on Oklahoma State, but they've been guaranteed 3 wins in the non-conference, and if you have you go back to the past couple of years, you take three wins out of the pool, and suddenly you're not a bowl game. You're not going to a bowl game. There's going to be a lot of those, and so what do you do about bowl games who aren't able to fill capacity because you don't have that full slate of games? So I mean, there's a lot. Again, the reason we're not making a lot of money because we don't have these decisions, and we probably can't think even greater picture. But there's a greater picture than just saying we need to have games back. We can just do conference. It's like, well, what does that mean for the bowl games? What does that mean for TV revenue? What does that mean for this? There's probably for Coach Holder right now up at Oklahoma State, he's probably just for football looking about 5 to 6 pages worth of stuff of how will this affect? How will this affect? How will this affect if we do it with or without fans, or if we have it at all, and stuff like that. And that's the crazy thing is we don't know, and I think that's why we're talking about it is we're speculating, but they are the ones truly having to make these tough decisions and actually look at all of the possible effects, positive and negative, of anything going forward after hopefully come this fall.
My stance would still remain that we're going to see college football in some form or fashion here. I wouldn't be able to guarantee, or I probably wouldn't want to put money down either on if there would be, I guess you would call it a full season. Yeah. Would there be lost games? Here's
a question for you. If you were posed as a fan and whatnot, and obviously we want to get back to sports, but you think the revenue will be better by saying we move it to spring because we can then allow fans, would you consider that being the option, or would you say let's go ahead and go with fall with no fans?
Yeah, if they said that and guaranteed, we will have fans, and not only that, you can be full capacity, or something like that. They said we're going to be able to pack out these stadiums. Then yeah, I think you would be able to push it back, and would be something that, again, you'd have to weigh the numbers. But you have to also realize how much money does come in on a given Saturday from fans alone. So I don't know exactly how much Boone Pickens holds over there. I don't know the capacity, but think of all the stadiums that are even bigger than that. We're talking 100,000 plus at some of these places. So if it comes down to that, then I think ultimately, I would pull the trigger on it.
Yeah, hey, and again, that's I'm sure a question, and maybe that's why the Iowa president put it that way. Because he hasn't said we're going to have football this fall. He just said we're going to get to practice June 1.
Right.
And then it's because again, maybe he's thinking in the approach of, if we can't have fans in the fall, maybe we should consider putting in the spring so we can have fans, so we can continue. Because in that same tweet from the Cedar Rapids reporter, it was a case where she also mentioned that I believe it was, I think she had all three for both. Yeah, she had the University of Iowa is expecting to lose $76 million in lost revenue from COVID-19 expenses, and $76 million. Iowa State is projecting to their losses will reach $89 million, and that's apparently being on the conservative side. And then she also mentions Northern Iowa up there, another D1. It's at $28 million losses.
That's why the point remains for all these schools that they realize and know that they have to have football. It has to happen at some point in some way. So you get all these reports now of, hey, we're going to have it. We're going back to practice. But you like to hear a date thrown in there now when they say, for instance, Iowa, or we're going to come back June 1st. That's what we were planning on doing. And you're like, okay, there we go. I got a solid date attached to this. Maybe that ends up being the case. Everyone's right now hoping for the best in terms of that, hey, we can not only have football, but a full season. Yeah. And that's what you have to take in when you hear these reports is, they said they're going to play football, but you have to remember, are we talking full season? Are we talking fans? All that's going to be played out.
And we have to keep in mind, for Oklahoma State fans who thinking maybe we can do that. We also have to keep in mind that Oklahoma State's already announced that they're essentially keeping the campus closed until July 1.
Yeah, that's so. And it kind of does that make you right there wonder if that was a little too preemptive? Was that a little far-fetched when they said July 1st? If some schools end up having practices starting back on June 1st?
Well, I think it was more of a preparation for the stuff that need to be moved around and canceled, and obviously classes. But maybe they weren't thinking about the fact of, hey, what about getting athletes back on campus, getting them in dorms and whatnot for the summer months and stuff like that, if we're allowed to get back to but again, who knows, maybe because I know Burns Hargis and Holder are in on a lot of NCAA committees and whatnot, so maybe they have a little more knowledge, and maybe they actually know that July 1's a more realistic date for athletes getting back. I don't know.
Yeah, and I like just the idea of that because, or like for instance, Iowa saying June 1st, that's maybe where some other schools, including Oklahoma State, could have looked and said, well, the NCAA said May 31st, and they're going to reevaluate at that point. So maybe we throw out the beginning of June instead, because all of a sudden, if you get on June 1st, the NCAA says, okay, you can have people back on campus. You can have players back on campus. Does Oklahoma State have to go back immediately and say, well, we're going to have to push this up actually now? Athletes, if they are able to, can come back earlier than we thought, for instance. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see because obviously it's not the same for every university.
Yeah, and again, that's what's going to be interesting, and what's been, I think, in my mind, been difficult here covering Oklahoma State is we haven't gotten, the only person we've really gotten access to was Mike Gundy, and obviously he made comments that went haywire on the national scene, but we haven't gotten to talk to Burns Hargis. We haven't gotten to talk to Holder to get a feel for the local, the local aspect of, because again, the city of Stillwater is starting to reopen things starting tomorrow. Right. Obviously, still some limitations in place of what can open. They're still wanting to, a lot of patrons have to have masks on in certain places. But what does this mean for Oklahoma State? What does this mean for the university that the city around it is starting to, and the state that is in is starting to, get back to normal? We haven't heard anything from the university as far as, how they're trying to potentially follow suit.
Yeah, and how many businesses around this area are waiting to hear if football is going to happen or not too. I mean, you have to talk about them planning for that type of thing and the revenue that comes into the town, and especially if fans are allowed to. I hate that because I think a lot of them are still in limbo around this area, even with reopening. But it just, again, stretches to how far college football really covers, around a football town like Stillwater, for instance. So you have to hope that the news comes out sooner or later, especially for, if anything, for those local business owners, no doubt. But yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because tomorrow the stay-at-home order officially expires midnight and goes into effect tomorrow. So I think it's half capacity for restaurants that are reopening, and there's a lot of stipulations in place. I know some businesses requiring still masks that need to be worn if you're going to go in, and you have to have appointments scheduled ahead of time for basically everything regarding the self-care services like haircuts and whatnot, all of that. But it is good news. We're moving forward here in Oklahoma as a whole and in Stillwater as well. Hey, Jason, when we come back, let's talk NBA, because they had talked about a new idea of how they could maybe save this season. I don't know if it's going to happen, but we'll talk about it. And then actually, you know what? Let's save that for when Tom comes in at 4. When we come back, you and I are going to discuss something that Aaron Rodgers or Brett Favre said about Aaron Rodgers. That's next on the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
You know I love you to death, even if both break down tonight. And you say you hate me, and we go to bed angry. I know everything will be alright. I'll be here waiting. I promise I'm changing. I just need time. I need time. I just need time. I need time.
Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler and Jason Elmquist with you. 105.1 FM, Triple Play Sports Radio app. Former Packers great Brett Favre spoke out about the Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love situation. Jordan Love, of course, being drafted in the first round by the Green Bay Packers. Traded up for it nonetheless. Possibly looking like he's going to be the quarterback of the future in Green Bay. Brett Favre joined Rich Eisen on his show and said Aaron Rodgers, in his opinion, ended his career somewhere else, just like somebody else, namely Brett Favre. Thinks Aaron Rodgers will take a similar path. Has, I think, 4 years. Is it 4 years on his contract? I have to remember that. What's left, and he'll probably play, they say he wants to play 4 more years. I think 2 years left on his contract in Green Bay. So if that being the case, you ready for the hot take of the day, Jason? Because I'm about to throw your way. This is hot take of the day regarding Aaron Rodgers. I say he's not only on the trade block, he's not only tradable all of a sudden, but the New England Patriots are going to find a way to grab Aaron Rodgers.
Interesting.
When you think about that, does that make sense? I mean,
yeah.
I'm still not sold that Jarrett Stidham's going to be the guy in New England. I'm just not.
Right.
And they didn't grab anybody in the draft. They haven't pulled the trigger on Cam Newton, who's still out there.
Jameis Winston's obviously off the board.
He's off the board. So why not make something like this happen if the Packers, which I think they've made it very clear that Aaron Rodgers is not quarterback of the future anymore. Jordan Love will be coming in. And also you have to bring in the idea of, there's no longer this whole sit for multiple years if you're a backup quarterback and be groomed into the system thing. He's going to be in there quicker than a lot of people think. Might even pull a Mahomes situation where it's maybe just 1 year.
Yeah. Well, and I saw, I can't remember where the report was from, but supposedly the GM and head coach up in Green Bay have already, are already basically fed up with the antics of Rodgers, and that's what led to them, making that draft pick. So, and again, that's what I kind of had felt was the situation to begin with, but no, that's an interesting. This is an interesting take I didn't think about because I was thinking eventually you find a case where he after the next 2 years, they part ways, then you bring in Love. But if you're wanting to possibly, if you think Love's the guy, the answer going forward, maybe you do try to trade and get some value out of Rodgers now. And again, that would also make sense why you went with a running back is kind of the, we're going to start, just basically do a complete overhaul and prepare for, 3 years from now.
I mean, if you're the Patriots, people could see something like this happening with Bill Belichick. I could see it. Bill Belichick going, look what he did. He got it done. They had this plan the whole time that they were going to wait. They were going to be patient. The Packers ended up doing something that's stupid in a lot of people's eyes. But maybe the Patriots this whole time are thinking, you know what? That could be our guy. That could definitely be our guy. If the Packers, but you have to think too, are going with Jordan Love and he's going to be their new quarterback sometime soon, they're not setting him up to succeed very well. We have to remember they still don't have the weapons at wide receiver that, Aaron Rodgers is good enough to make some of those guys good for, I don't know how long. I don't know if it's going to last. But when Devontae Adams is your only target, you're feeling a little lonely out there, I think, if you're Jordan Love. So that would have to be a move that the Packers would have to make. If they get rid of Aaron Rodgers, they got to find a way to get a wide receiver. Does New England say, we'll give you Julian Edelman and then something else, a draft pick for Aaron Rodgers, for instance?
Yeah, I don't know, because then again, if you're Rodgers or if you're New England, if you're trying to bring him in, I'm assuming you don't want to get rid of what would be his only and top target as of last year. So yeah, in my mind, if Green Bay does trade him, it's going to be for draft capital. And that's why, and that's the thing. That's the crazy thing, though, is the last couple of years, draft capital even for veteran quarterbacks doesn't seem to be nearly as valuable as it used to be. I mean, it seems like now you're only seeing agreements for like a second or third round picks. I mean, again, a crazy one like DeAndre Hopkins, you see is not even getting the quality of a first round pick. Does a guy like Aaron Rodgers, especially since he's towards the end of his career, warrant getting a first round out of him? So again, I don't know if they do consider trading him, what they consider would be valuable enough to say, hey, we're going to boot on potentially this year or next year because we can, if the stock that we get back is going to be worth enough.
Yeah, if they do end up trading him and they don't get a wide receiver out of the deal, then you have to think as a Green Bay fan, we're just going to be rebuilding this year, basically. Or we're just going to be, hoping we get a good pick into the draft. And maybe if we traded Aaron Rodgers, we will have a good solid couple of picks. And there's no way we could whiff again in the draft and not grab a receiver. So, I mean, it's interesting because if the reports are true about Green Bay front office officially being fed up with Aaron Rodgers, I mean, we don't know how he's really reacted to this whole situation. According to Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers was the one that did end up reaching out to him and had a conversation with him about coming in, and it was all the pleasant exchanges of can't wait to work with you, blah, blah, blah. But we know Aaron Rodgers, and a new change of scenery could very well be his guy. I heard a couple of people talking about yesterday, too, that, hey, you have to think a lot of receivers don't want to go to Green Bay. They don't want to play in the freezing cold and the snow and all that. It's just not a good landing spot for receivers around the league. So no one's really that interested in being in Green Bay, even if Aaron Rodgers is there. So you throw all that in, it's going to be an interesting storyline to watch, because I don't know about you if you agree that he's 100% on the trade block, but I think he is.
I mean, it makes sense. It would make sense because again, but I think it also is going to have to be. They're going to have to make sure it's worth it. To me, maybe two at the very minimum, 2 second-round picks. But in my mind, if I'm getting rid of, if I'm trading away a Super Bowl champion and a MVP quarterback who thinks that he has at least 4 years left on his career, and the fact that because keep in mind you also have the possibility of if you're wanting to win a Super Bowl, of facing him either in a Super Bowl or in the playoffs if he's still in division or in your conference. you have to weigh that. So in my mind, if I'm a GM and I am considering it, I have to make sure that I'm getting a lot of good value out of him before I'm going to be willing to throw that trigger. Even if he is a disgruntled quarterback and whatnot, if you have him under contract for the next 2 years, I'm not just giving him away.
And how much too would Matt LaFleur love to kind of prove that, he did it last year, that he can be a pretty good coach, but prove that getting a brand new quarterback, he can mold him in his image. And say that Jordan Love all of a sudden has some success and he goes, look, I got it done. How could that impact his career down the road? So there's definitely some incentives there, I think, behind the scenes of getting rid of Aaron Rodgers. And if you don't get solid picks for him, though, then you're wasting that. Yeah.
And is it also not an interesting development or realization that maybe it is all Aaron Rodgers, because this is now essentially 2 head coaches that he's in the past 2 years essentially that he's either rubbed the wrong way or forced management to fire in McCarthy, and then one that now wants to already replace him.
I mean, it could be. Is this dude truly insufferable? Because it's almost coming off as that, like some of the reports
just ask
we
his
get.
Family.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It's like, wow, is it really that bad? And if Green Bay ultimately pulls the trigger and gets rid of him, then maybe, it is. I don't know. It'll be very interesting to keep an eye on, because I am of the belief that he could be on the move. When we come back, Tom Dorado will be joining us. We'll talk about where the NBA might end up if they can continue their season. And, of course, Donnie Walton will be on with us later on out of the Mariners organization. That's next on the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
Yeah. Levitating off the blacktop. Used to struggle getting started, now I can't stop. Used to be the quiet kid in the sandbox, now it's hands up every time that your man rocks. They ought to stop me coming in again. You mad? You thought we were synonyms? Too bad, that's the water you're getting in. You're too fat for the sharks that you're swimming in. Where I'm sitting, contenders are looking like fruit spinning around in the blender. Hardly a snack when I'm here looking for dinner. I eat them, delete them, they're barely beginners. Main course is my main sport. Play major, but minor's my main fort. Put a chain around everything I came for. Look, don't judge, sucker, tell them take an IOU. Say they want respect now, thinking they deserve to have it next now. Tell them take an IOU. Believe in what they're making up. Talking loud, but never really.
It's the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
I've been drawing
105.1.
They think I'm giving them.
And the Triple Play Sports Radio app, hour number 2. Patrick Wheeler with you. Tom Dorado, TD, just walked in and joined the show as well. Tommy, another day in the life.
Yes, it is. And maybe another day closer to what we used to know back in the days.
It is. Okay, I'll say that based off.
At least we're moving in that direction.
Yeah, we are. Yeah. What we were talking about earlier, Iowa came out, their president, about 3 o'clock, saw the report that they're planning on having practices returned for sports back on June 1st, is what they said. Texas A&M said today they plan on 100% having football this fall, and the students will be back.
June 1st becomes somewhat of a magic number, like we were talking.
Isn't it funny how we hear all these dates?
Yeah.
And you go, that's going to be the day, because it was originally May 31st, right? Is when you get that idea.
Yeah.
And that's what we were talking about, because Oklahoma State had said, hey, we're not doing anything till July 1st.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of wondered, was that trigger pulled a little too early, too far down the road, maybe?
Well, it could have been, but we're all great, especially in sports. We're all great 2020 people.
We really are.
We know what happened yesterday, so we can get on the air and say, you know what? I would not have done that. Well, what would you have done when you were faced with it the day before? Okay, so maybe that May 31st looked good when they threw it out, because I forget when they threw it out. It was what, early March, middle of March, somewhere in there. Maybe it was. Yeah, I guess it was. No, maybe the end of March, somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
And May 31st looked like it was a long way away, right? And that they probably felt this is probably enough time to figure out where we're headed, one way or the other. But I understand. I don't know this for a fact, but I understand Oklahoma State's going to open up their buildings to the public here in about another 7, 8, 9 days, which is yet another step toward. Now, that doesn't mean everybody could rush in with no masks.
Right.
And we could have 40 people going in the door at one time. That's not what it means. But these are small steps, right? And I don't exactly know what it's going to be. I don't want to say something that's out of line, because all I know is I think that was said early. So they're going to open up the campus, start opening it up a little bit earlier. Now, does that mean they're going to open up, people can have teams back, start working out? I mean, I don't know that for a fact, but that's a good example right there that, June 1 is the May 31st Power 5 deadline is gone now. And maybe some schools are looking around saying, now we can start moving ahead.
Well, because on the
restrictively.
On the 31st, if the NCAA comes out and says, okay, good to go, players can be back, and then all of a sudden someone the president of Iowa is like, look how smart we were.
Now, if they come out and say
another month, or
we need another month to get this figured, so let's go from May 31st to June 30th.
And then Oklahoma State says, look, we were the geniuses over here.
I mean, so it just, Iowa would have to backtrack a bit, right?
Right.
But let's look optimistically. Every one of these little steps, even though they're not where we were before, are positive, because we're going in that direction.
Exactly.
Right now.
Yep.
And eventually they'll become big steps.
Yeah,
we've got to make the little steps count.
Yep. It is a lot of positive steps forward. Again, do want to mention that the stay-at-home order for Stillwater ends this evening.
Yes, sir.
Midnight, technically starting tomorrow. And I know some restaurants are reopening, and I think it's 50% capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And there's plenty of restrictions as well. There's social distancing guidelines that will be put out there. So definitely pay attention to that too. So before you just hop on and go out to a restaurant, make sure you know the restrictions that are in place. And I know as well for some barbershops and places to get your haircut and all that stuff, still masks are required, and appointments, call ahead.
Can't gather in the front waiting. You're gonna have to wait your call and sit in your car.
Yeah. So
and
all
these are different, but there's still steps that are in the right direction.
Hey, it's better than what it was in all of them being closed.
Right,
we have to take that as we go. So definitely a positive step in the right direction.
And we don't want to mess it up, because did you see where now California?
Yeah, I know what you're going to say.
Everybody rushed to the beaches and showed no social distancing, nothing. So the governor closed them again. Now, we don't want a situation where we don't have beaches to shut down, but we don't want everybody to just say, okay, it's done. Hey, we're done, and we're going to go, hey, grab 40 of your buddies and let's go to the park or whatever, because then you're going to force leaders into saying, okay, we opened it. However, you did not follow the guidelines. Thus, we'll have to shut it down again. Now, we don't want that again.
No, I think Governor Newsom is being a little overprotective
Perhaps.
here. I don't know what guidelines exactly he had put in place in terms of the beaches, but they need to be specific and well guarded, I would say.
The guidelines that I read were from Florida, not necessarily California, but when they opened the beaches in Florida, it was there had to be distancing. Nobody could camp out and sunbathe, and we can't have 30 people sitting around one little group. But it seemed like California decided that was what it's going to do, and saw some pictures, and there were a bunch of people just hanging around.
That was the one I brought up to you yesterday, and it was they were flooded, weren't they?
So they said, hey, well, if you're not going to do it the way we set it out, then you're not going to do it, period.
Yeah, and we already know that LA's been one of the hot spots of controversy, because they've said that they don't know if there will be large gatherings allowed in LA till 2021.
It's New York on the West Coast.
Right. So let's look at let's talk about sports coming back here. The NBA came out with a type of idea here. I almost called it a proposal, but it's not quite there yet. I think it definitely could work, though. And that is finishing the season in Orlando at Disney World. Because they have that worldwide sports complex that ESPN's also a part of as well. So they have those courts, according to sources that have been around all that. There's plenty of courts that have multiple games at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And all those courts are basically also set up for broadcast capabilities as well. So you already have that on top of it. It's all private property. You're talking over 250 acres of an enclosed area. So you've got your little bubble there. There's housing on that campus as well.
The park is shut down.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So there would be nobody coming in and out. It would be all the NBA teams in this one area trying to finish out the season. Again, they were like 2 weeks away, I believe.
What's left? How many games away?
They were like 2 weeks from being into the playoffs when this all started. So there was, there's like 12 to 15, I think, games per team was what averaged out to be. So you're talking about that many games. If you can do multiple games per day, and it's almost like NASCAR. NASCAR announced today that they're planning on coming back and gave the date on May 17th is when they'll be back in their first race. And they said ultimately they'll be having 7 races in 11 days. Mm-hmm. So that's what I think the NBA would have to do. If they can get the all clear and pull this off at Disney World, then they say, okay, but we're going to have to get these 15 games in like 20 days or something like that per team. It would have to be something that drastic for them to be able to launch themselves into the playoffs and try to get that going as well. I don't know. I like the idea, though. It's kind of just like Major League Baseball said, put them in the bubble and work it out. And it's a little different with the NBA because they obviously have less to do. I don't know. Does it sound like a good idea to you?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's certainly feasible, but you also have unions that have to get by, and I don't know that they can just come out and say this is what we're going to do, and the union doesn't approve of it, and then all of a sudden they can't do it. But it sounds somewhat feasible, and I think every sport, we see it. You just mentioned 2, and we'll get into this with Donnie Walton coming up here shortly. Baseball has thrown out the geographic conferences, the West, East, Central, and in an effort to get baseball back. And Donnie, he spent the last probably 3 weeks with Seattle up at the big club last year. They only had a little bit of spring training, but I'm interested in what he hears and what he thinks, because while he was assigned to Tacoma right before spring training was ended, just 2 days before, I mean, he's going back there this year. You can be sure that they didn't send him down there to stay forever. But I'd be interested in what he's been doing and how he would approach this. And, Donnie, I think I can probably say without reservation, would say, well, whatever they do, they just tell me where to go. I go, and I'll go play because I want to play.
Yeah.
But, this is a guy who's basically been in the bigs and will be back in the bigs. And I'll be interested in seeing what his reaction will be to all these scenarios that are thrown out there.
I remember that proposal being tossed out pretty early on when this all happened and the NBA announced they were postponed. Hey, there's a spot we could sequester and throw in right at Disney World, and all this. And that idea was kind of like, it was pushed to the side, but now it's gaining some more traction because, as I said, I still don't think the NBA is going to resume. And LeBron James comes out today and says that no one's that he's heard of has even talked about canceling the season. Now that I don't buy for 1 second. I think that's definitely been
up somewhere.
Yeah, I would say so.
I just wonder how. I don't know what's the word I'm seeking. How attractive it will be to people outside to watch games on this level, on these courts. Now, I guess if you're an NBA fan, you don't care where they're playing, just as long as they're playing.
Yeah, they wouldn't care.
But could you get into the fact that, man, this game's for the 5th seed versus the 3rd seed? Could you get into it that much? Could you follow the Thunder halfway across the country? As versus baseball that is trying to, while the fans may not be there, but are trying to get back to the parks, their own parks, where it might add a little bit more of a realistic view than playing at Disney World. But, that's neither here nor there. The whole idea is these sports are trying to get back to something. And it seems like they're making progress, even though it may not be great progress. Before long, maybe we'll have bits and pieces of this sport and that sport.
And interesting, too, just got an update from the SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey. Mm-hmm. He said that there's room for leagues to handle football resumption differently. So he's kind of throwing out that idea, too, of league by league basis here. And I think that a lot of that has to do, again, regionally. If the Big 12 wants to handle something different than the Pac-12, then I think that's very well something that could happen here. And that's kind of what he's saying in this report, too, is he's talking about the desire, he says, would be to have 11 states and 14 institutions moving forward in a collective manner and connected nationally so that they can start the college football season. So you get those numbers right there that he throws out. Again, that's Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC. And he kind of talked about, too, I think that the SEC, and I've said it before, is one of they're going to have football. They're going to get it done. But that hotspot of teams, I think, is in the region where they could be the ones to ultimately get it started, for instance. It just so happens. Big 12 as well, we're fortunate enough to be in an area that's not extremely hit very hard, I guess you could say, compared to other areas around the country too. So you have to think this area, if the Big 12 and the SEC are able to get on board, and just like you said there, 11 states, 14 institutions, Oklahoma State could try to be a part of that for all we know.
You would hope in the grand scheme of things that's what it is, and that's that everything continues, if at no worse, to stay the way it is in these areas, and maybe at best go down and really be positive. But I could see where some conferences would not feel comfortable about opening it up, and there might be some states within each conference that may not feel comfortable opening up their school or their football team. And I think those are the things that have to be weighed. But keep in mind, we're just beginning May. You got May, June, July. You got 3 solid months for, let's be positive, for things to continue to improve. Mm-hmm. I guess somebody could call and say, well, you got 3 months where things could go downhill. Well, if they go downhill, nobody's going to play. But you've got to have a plan, right? You've got to have an idea. Here's what we're going to do. And I think most of these conferences, even out there in the Pac-12, you got the LA area, you got USC, UCLA. They're probably not looking at tomorrow to play.
And that's what Sankey is saying, that there doesn't have to be unity for us to get started. If the SEC and the Big 12 can start with no limitations, really, then they're going to do it. If they can have a certain number, and I think it makes sense, because if teams in the Pac-12 don't have that ability just because in a different region, then so be it. Really.
I don't know that they would be necessarily we would say no because they're not in.
No.
But I do think you would probably have to include some kind of a grand scheduling thing, though, because, and I don't know how many Pac-12 teams are playing SEC teams, and we know Oklahoma State's got Oregon State in. I don't know how many of those are going on in non-conference. But even if that's a problem, you don't have to play them. I mean, you don't have to have non-conference.
Yeah,
so
well, even if
play your conference.
Yeah, exactly. Even if the SEC said we're just going to play conference games, that's fine. That's what people pay attention to, anyways.
Sure.
And more often, the same with the Big 12. I would have to think that would be the case too.
I think it's far from being in stone yet, but at least we're moving toward that direction, and more people sounding more optimistic, Patrick, about we'll be playing.
It's funny because Jordan Woodruff just texted me. He had talked to me about it previously and had kind of thrown out that idea that Sankey had just said that, hey, the SEC, they'll end up starting before anybody else if they have to, but they're not going to miss SEC football. It's just not going to happen. And that's kind of what. So how bold of a statement, I guess, is that from Sankey, from saying?
Well, I think he's setting the table that, you know what, we don't have to be on, everybody doesn't have to be on board the same way. Now, that'll still be up to the NCAA committees and people who run the show and say this, but, the SEC's got a lot of teams, right? And they got a lot of teams who want to play. A lot of schools that need to play. Big 12 has a lot of schools that need to play. Just like baseball, we may have a whole different setup in terms of how the total football picture is going to look this year. But the best thing is it looks like there will be a picture to look at as versus what we thought maybe a month ago where, oh, my goodness, we won't play till next spring. Yeah. Well, I don't think that's the case at all now.
There's going to be college football, and I think it's on the horizon, that's for sure.
Yes, sir.
Wrapping up the afternoon sports drive. Thanks for hanging out with us on Thursday. Just got a great interview with Donnie Walton. A lot of good stuff from his perspective, and I hate it for guys like him that he was in a spot where he was in limbo for a long time, and maybe he still is a little bit, but we're getting closer to maybe some official news on baseball and where everyone will end up. But baseball they were in spring training. They were finishing up spring training, and it was a week or two away from officially starting the season. I told Jason, you realize we would have been over a month now into the Major League Baseball season?
Yeah, because that would count the early games overseas.
Yeah. And then the season would have started March 26th.
Wow.
And here we are, April 30th.
And they still really don't know when to do it.
No, they don't.
But it's this latest plan. But you could see that, I don't want to call it disconnect, Patrick, because we've had so many ex-Cowboys that are in the majors and minors on over the years. There's really not a whole lot of communication. I mean, they don't come to everybody in the organization and say, here's what we're doing. I mean, a lot of times you leave the season's over, and like Jordy Mercer, for instance, told a story. Now, he went on to have a great career with the Pirates and played a long time. But I remember like the first 2 years he was with the Pirates. He came back here. And I said, what'd they tell you? He said, they didn't tell me anything.
Wow.
Other than you need to hit more home runs. We need a shortstop to hit more home runs. He said, that's the last thing they told me.
Isn't that crazy? That's how it is.
He said, the last time I heard, next time I heard from him was when I went to spring training.
Yeah.
So they don't call you every hour to tell you what's going on.
The communication is little and it's straightforward, and that's
because it's a business.
Yeah, exactly.
We'd like to think it isn't, but it is.
Oh, it is. It absolutely is. Let's talk about this business real quick, because Yadi Molina came out yesterday, said he's now open to free agency after this season. Originally planned on sticking with the Cardinals, had this year left on his contract. Mm-hmm. And then I think he was thinking he might retire depending on how the season went. Maybe St. Louis signs him to one more year. It was amazing that they were able to get it done another year this upcoming season, just because of how long he's been in the league at that position. Mm-hmm. And I have to give credit to my dad on this one, because he kind of gave me the idea immediately, saying, hey, this whole coronavirus situation is a perfect leveraging tool here for Yadi Molina. Mm-hmm. He can come out now and say, hey, if we're only going to have 100 games, that's 60 plus, 40 plus, 50 plus games that are taken off my legs now. And all of a sudden, I feel even better. I feel like I could go 3 more years now.
But is he sure the Cardinals are not going to sign him
He's
up?
not sure, and he said that he wants to stay in St. Louis, which, here's my thing. If I'm the front office in St. Louis, I'm John Mozeliak, I'm saying, look, we give him a 2-year deal max. Not a day over. If he says, which he has said, he wants to play 2 more years after this now. Mm-hmm. So if he says that, I think you honor that. The Cardinals find a way to get him on there for 2 more years. But if he ends up saying, change my mind, let's make it 3, you got to let him walk, because Andrew Knizner sitting back there is fantastic catcher.
Yeah, but
young.
Stop and think about this, though. I mean, there's not a catcher in either league, and that's saying a lot, because there's good catchers in both leagues. That's more durable.
You're right.
That's more dependable. Maybe he doesn't hit as well as he used to. I mean, I guess if you want to split hairs.
Yeah, but still consistent enough.
But he's as good with pitchers behind the plate as you can find anywhere, anyhow.
That's it. The way he calls games is unmatched.
He has to break a leg to come out of the lineup.
Exactly.
He's not coming out of the lineup.
Yeah, when he is, you don't want to be a catcher in the Cardinals organization.
Now, within reason, if he asks for, I want 10 more. Right.
Yeah, that's not
but why wouldn't you work with him within reason, so he's not out there shopping himself around? Because I think the Cardinals will find out in a hurry that if they don't want to extend him, there are a number of teams who would jump on him immediately.
Well,
and give him 2 years or 3 to be with him.
They found out real quick after Pujols left. Of course, we know how many years he wanted in the deal he wanted, which wasn't going to be reasonable for St. Louis. So that's kind of different. But when you look at Yadi, the name that's the first name you think of when you think of the St. Louis Cardinals franchise. He's been the face. You want him to retire a Cardinal,
and I think he probably wants
to retire a Cardinal. You want there to be that.
So why wouldn't you work?
Yeah,
with
and that's what I'm saying. If Mozeliak if they can't get it done, which there's been plenty of times as of late too, where I've really questioned the Cardinals front office. Used to not do that at all, but a lot of moves that they either didn't make or did make, that you're just like, why? So if something comes out where they go, you know what, we're going to end Yadi's career here after this, then you're kind of like, come on.
From a PR viewpoint, that probably wouldn't be very smart. Now, again, the thing with Pujols turned out to be okay. I mean, but Molina's not going to hold the club up for ransom.
No, and I don't think so either.
He understands he's on the downhill portion of his career.
Don't you think, though, that he jumped on this perfectly? A little bit?
Maybe. I mean, it's a business, as we said. You're always trying to find out what's in the cards for you. And I would think Molina, if he was sitting here with us, would say, as much as I love them, it is a business, and you're never sure where you fit in the future. But I'm not even talking about the money. This guy, while he is old, quote, older, to me, he hasn't slipped at all X and O wise.
And in that position, no.
If you want to bring up, maybe he doesn't hit as well, especially hit it with power, maybe you got something going there. But there's not a better X and O catcher or a better work with young pitcher catcher in the entire game of baseball.
What he's done.
So why wouldn't you give him 2 or 3 more years?
What he's done at that position for 19 seasons, that shouldn't be even
19
possible.
Seasons of
catching
solid work. I mean, again,
that shouldn't be possible at the major league
level.
You
have to just chain him to a post and before he won't play.
And and I think that last year they saw it even perfectly with Jack Flaherty coming in, brand new young pitcher, and Yadi handles him flawlessly, and he becomes one of the top pitchers in the major leagues as a rookie towards the end of that season. It shows you that he still has that ability. You still have Wainwright that's on the team. If you in the dream situation, you sign Yadi to 2 more years, you sign Wainwright to a year or 2 more years, and they both go out at the same time. That would be, as a Cardinal fan, that would be my dream situation. And I said it yesterday, ultimately to me too, if he were in another uniform, Pujols, it was weird enough. But to me, seeing Yadi in a different uniform, that's like, to me, the whole Tom Brady thing. It just wouldn't make sense.
I know of another team that would pick him up in a heartbeat if he became available.
Which one?
The Mets would take him.
The Mets. There would be a ton of teams that would jump on.
But he would not be out of work for 10 minutes.
Exactly, yeah.
But I can't see that ever coming to fruition.
I can't either.
Because he's not like Pujols. He's not going to hold the city up for ransom. He's not going to ask for something that's completely out of line. Pujols understands where he is in his career. He just wants to go out wearing that uniform.
Right.
Why wouldn't you work with him on that?
Yeah, and especially if he's open to it.
He's not going to cheat you any day in the game.
If he says, look, give me 2 more years, there would be no reason to say no.
It'll be 2 good years, X and O-wise.
You know that
it's
you're
not like some bum coming in here trying to get 2 years of salary.
You know what you're getting from him, and it's an organization that they won the division last season, but I promise you they weren't that good. And
nobody in that division was any good.
No, they weren't. But the Cardinals definitely were a part of that.
They were the best of the
best of the not goods. Yeah, I like that one. Yeah, I think he's going to be back. It gets, and especially depending on how this season goes. Let's say when they restart in June, that he just has a shortened season, obviously, and it just does wonders for him at the plate, for instance, hitting the ball. And they're like, you know what? 2 more years.
I'd be stunned
I would too
if they didn't work with him.
I would too. Yeah, I saw that report.
He's not gonna gouge him.
No, he's not. He's not. I would be.
He's not Pujols.
No, he's not. He's not. And at that time, he doesn't. He knows now too. He's not going to be able to sign a 5-year deal with anybody. I don't think.
But I will say with certainty, if for whatever reason the front office in St. Louis cannot see Yadi and the club moving forward after this shortened season, he won't be out of work. But 10 minutes.
No, I agree on that for sure. But
he'll have plenty of choices to make. He and his agent will have plenty of options.
If anyone were to remain a Cardinal forever, it's got to be Yadi. So I'm still hoping out on that basis as well. That's going to do it for us. Appreciate you joining me, TD, as always.
We're moving into this, even to Jason's chagrin, we're moving into Dugout Thursday now.
That's right. We are.
As soon as we get this baseball up and running,
which is going to happen. It's going to happen.
We'll get into Dugout Thursday. Yep. We'll have all kinds of good baseball talk.
Can't wait.
Thursday.
Miss baseball. I can't wait. This has been the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. As always, you can hear us on the Triple Play Sports Radio app. We'll be back on tomorrow. Jordan Bishop will be joining us.
The
Bish. Myself and Jason Elmquist will be there as well. And we'll see TD next week. Thanks as always, Tom. Appreciate you coming on.
Yes, sir.
Afternoon Sports Drive with Patrick Wheeler, Tom Dorado, Jason Elmquist.